This is David Diaz, former WBC lightweight champion of the world, and you're listening to The Grueling Truth.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I would like to welcome in my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser.
Good evening, Mike. I'm excited to be on, always excited to be on. Let's talk some boxing.
Yeah, and we had a great card this last weekend. We'll start it off by talking about Marcus Browne, who was a guy who in his last fight, the fight before this, people started to question a little bit because he won a controversial decision over a guy who, was it Kalijic?
Yeah,
it's hard to kill me, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's always hard. I know his nickname was Hot Rod, so we'll call him that.
He's Hot Rod then. But he dominated a game. Thomas Williams Jr. recently fought for the title, got knocked out in 2 rounds by Adonis Stevenson, knocked him down in the second round. Then he risked the disqualification, hit him while Williams was still down on the mat. Williams came back. 3rd, 4th round, did some nice work to Browne's body, but for the most part, the night was Marcus Browne's. Does this convince you more that maybe Marcus Browne has a future here as a top 10 light heavyweight?
Oh, I don't know. For me, Browne looked good, and we've got to give him that. But I think Williams gave him a little stylistic advantage. I mean, I think the aggressors are going to be the bane of Browne's existence. I mean, and 175 has a good number of them. I mean, we have all sorts of guys like Shabransky and, punchers like Alvarez and Joe Smith and Kovalev and, and even the upcoming guys like Bivol. I'm not convinced. I mean, he's throwing his hat into the ring, and he's calling out Adonis Stevenson. And you never know with Stevenson, they're both managed by Al Heyman. With them both being managed by Al Heyman, I suppose it's a possibility that this fight could come off. But, yeah, in terms of being convinced, I'm not. I mean, I would like to see Browne fight a top 10 guy, somebody who's a bit more aggressive, see if he's learned from his previous mistakes before he gets in the ring with Stevenson. But he looked good. He looked really good, and I was happy that he did so. I mean, because this was an American Olympian. So I always like to see these guys progress and get a little better. But unfortunately, I'm just not convinced. I think Stevenson's a leap too far. And I think maybe anybody inside the top 10 might be a bit too far as well.
Yeah, but especially Stevenson. I think with Stevenson, he's at least a year away from being able to have a outside shot against Stevenson because from what I saw, I mean, he was the aggressor, but against Stevenson, he's going to get hit. And what happens when he gets hit. And I'm not convinced that Marcus Browne has enough power to keep Stevenson from just walking through him.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, I haven't seen Browne. Browne was an American, and he saw all sorts of different styles in the amateur ranks, but Stevenson is a left-handed puncher. I mean, that poses, you see these styles a lot of times don't mesh well when you have a southpaw versus southpaw. I'm just, with Stevenson's experience, with his power, I'm just not sure Browne is up there. But, good luck to him in the future, and we'll see.
All right, and that brought us to the next fight of the evening for the welterweight title. David Avanesyan was defending against Lamont Peterson. Peterson was moving up from junior welterweight. And this was the fight that I was most impressed with. I mean, it wasn't the best fight of the night, but I thought Peterson was an entirely different fighter at welterweight. I mean, he was basically stalking Avanesyan, and I know I just got off the phone with somebody in his camp. Lamont's going to be on the show tomorrow night with his trainer, Barry Hunter, so make sure you check that out also. But Lamont's plan was to come out the first round or two, basically do next to nothing and see if Avanesyan could hurt him. He couldn't. He realized from the first time that he hit Avanesyan in the body that he couldn't take it. And, I mean, I was sitting probably 3 rows back watching the fight. It sounded like he was hitting Avanesyan with a baseball bat in the ribs constantly. And, I mean, I think Peterson is as good as anybody in the welterweight division right now.
Well, and he very well could be right. I mean, Peterson, we saw what he did against Garcia. I mean, he hung right with him, and most people that I've talked to thought that he beat Garcia. So, if Garcia is damn near the top of the division, then, we know Lamont Peterson is certainly up there. I mean, his offense are great after this fight. I mean, I'm sure he's hoping Danny Garcia wins the fight, so maybe he can get his revenge in the future. But he looked damn good. I mean, I've liked Peterson for a long, long time now. He's always been a versatile guy. He can box a bit. Obviously, he can brawl a bit, and he's a bit funner when he does choose to brawl. Unfortunately, it's hurt him in the past against guys like Lucas Tisse. But, yeah, he looked damn good. I mean, he looked really, really strong for the division. And the fact that Avanesyan couldn't hurt him was to his detriment. I mean, if you can't hurt Lamont Peterson, you're going to have a rough night. And Danny Garcia and other guys figured that firsthand. But in terms of
the Avanesyan, the entire group that was with him, were total class. Went to the weigh-in he was. And then after the fight even, I was told by Peterson's people that Avanesyan even tried to give them his belt. They didn't take it because they said he earned it and he should keep it. But that was impressive to me also. But I know he also went to the hospital after the fight. He took a number of body shots. Avanesyan, I think, is just a solid fighter. He's a tough guy. He's a tough out for anybody. But I look forward to seeing Peterson fight a Thurman and Garcia, or I know they talked about tonight in his camp, maybe even the winner of Brook and Spence.
That would be very interesting. The winner of Brook and Spence. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see Peterson against any of the top guys, especially the very, very best. Whoever wins Garcia Thurman, Brook Spence, I'm all for it. It's exciting to see him in the ring and doing well. And 147 just got.
Yeah, and the welterweight division is always packed. At least it seems like it is. There's not too many times where you have like the heavyweight division where it'll disappear for a decade. That brings us to the main event. Now, the main event has a backstory, too. The fight, I think, a month ago was supposed to be fought at 140. That was from Broner's camp, wanting it at 140. Then they moved it to 142. And then a week ago, they moved it to 147. And then, as I said, I was at the weigh-in. They come out for the weigh-in, and Granados somehow weighs in at 148, which is over the limit by a pound. Broner, out of the four fighters, because Marcus Browne was over by like a half a pound, Peterson was over by a half a pound. They ended up having to reweigh it in. And the thing that I don't know, maybe you can answer this question, maybe you know more about it than I do, but when you have to reweigh, shouldn't the other guy, even if he was under, have to reweigh on the scale that's correct?
Yeah, you would think that they would have to, but, it was in Cincinnati. But...
Yeah, but that's no excuse. I didn't buy that at all. I ended up having a fight score to draw. What'd you think?
Well, get to the more controversial stuff in a second. It was a damn good fight. As I said in last week's show, Broner's not an elite welterweight. He's not going to be. He's not big enough. He looks quick still. I got to give him that. His hand speed is still very good.
He doesn't hit hard enough, though.
No, he doesn't. Granados is, rock solid. There's a guy that can take loads of punishment. But if you're barely beating guys like Granados, again, you're not going to beat the creme de la creme of the division, especially a packed division like 147. But to the fight itself, again, it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. What I'd say is if Granados had power, this would be a repeat of the Maidana fight.
Yeah, because, basically any fighter that will get in Broner's grill and bring the fight to him, he has trouble with. And, the only difference is Maidana is more of a welterweight than Granados. Granados is a junior welterweight. The post-fight press conference, he said he was going back down there. They asked him, I don't know if you saw the press conference or not after the fight, but they asked him if Broner's punches hurt at all, and he said no. And, I think this. I think these guys should fight again. I think they ought to do it at junior welterweight. I think at junior welterweight, these are two top five guys with a shot to win a belt. I think at welterweight, I don't think either one of them had. I watched Lamont Peterson before this fight, and Lamont Peterson, I think, walks through either one of these guys.
I would have to agree. Peterson certainly looked a notch above both. But, I think you're right. At 140, I think they both are a bit quicker. I think, they're both stronger. The power is a bit more in Broner's favor. It's, Granados gains a little power too, but it was a damn good fight. I'd love to see the rematch. Part of me would like to see it in neutral territory. I mean, it just felt like...
No, we want to see it in Cincinnati again, so I can easily go watch it.
Yeah, that makes sense. But my only issue is that, it just kind of felt like Granados had all the cards stacked against him. I mean, he did.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, the crowd, I mean, it was announced at like 6,000 or 7,000. I would guess that probably 1,500 or 2,000 came from Chicago to watch Granados.
Yeah, wow. That's the Granados' credit, too. I mean, the fact that he could bring over that sort of crowd is pretty impressive. But
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that. No, you. But, I'll lay out the red carpet. But, I was, I want to give credit to Granados as well, because this is a guy, he doesn't, Broner is clearly the more naturally gifted of the two, but Granados is just such a fun guy to watch. And I really do think this fight is going to get him bigger paydays in the future, because he's a threat, but I don't know if he's a big enough threat to, for guys to stray away from him. I mean, a lot of times...
I think he could be a junior welterweight.
Maybe. I don't know.
If you look at him, no matter who he's fought, I mean, he's lost, I think, 4 or 5 fights now. Every one of those was a split or majority decision.
Yeah,
and it was usually in the other guy's hometown.
Right, yeah.
I was impressed by him. I mean, not as a welterweight, but as a junior welterweight. It's just like if Ricky Hatton fights Floyd Mayweather Jr. at junior welterweight, I don't think necessarily Hatton beats him, but I think it's a lot more competitive fight at that weight because that's what Hatton was.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and to your point about him, having close fights, I mean, he lost a majority decision to Frankie, who I think is an excellent welterweight prospect. He drew with our own Kermit Cintron. I mean, he got a lost a majority decision to Felix Diaz, who's a damn good fighter himself. Beat up Sammy Vazquez. Barely lost to Solomon. Granados is a damn good fighter. His power is always going to hurt him in the long run, but if they pair him up correctly, I mean, I wouldn't mind watching him against, Provodnikov's not retired. I mean, I would love to see that put on at 140.
That would be a great fight.
Oh, that would be wonderful. I wouldn't even mind at 147 to see him fight, I don't know, a faded Brandon Rios. I mean, there are a lot of good fights that he could have.
Yeah. But the other thing that gets me is after the fight, you get in the ring, Adrian Broner's sitting on there talking about how he's grown up, how he's straightening his act up. And I think it's basically bullshit. I mean, because this is the thing. If you've grown up and you've straightened up your act, it's not just about how you act when you're out in public. It's what you do in training. And the fact that this fight was made at 140 and it had to go to 147 for him to make weight tells me that he may have changed a little bit, but he's still the same guy.
Yeah, he is the same guy. I mean, he's always been the same guy. I mean, I think...
And he's wasted a ton of talent.
Yeah, he is. I mean, we talked about this in the last show. I mean, Broner's he's not where he should be, and unfortunately, he's not ever going to be where he needs to be.
Because now it's too late for him to ever be what he could have been. I mean, he could still be a world-class junior welterweight if he gets his stuff together, but he's never going to be what he could have been. I mean, the guy has a ton of talent, and how many times do we see a guy with a ton of talent piss it away like this?
Over and over. I mean, the sport is a case study of guys that have done that. I mean, I don't know how many guys have come through the sport. You think to yourself, like, oh, that might be the one. Well, no, it isn't the one. But yeah,
well, I mean, it happens in every sport, and it seems to be the guys that are given these gifts from God. I mean, he can do everything. He doesn't think he has to work for it. But then, before you know it, you get guys like Granados or Marcus Madonna, who you have a lot more talent than probably, but they just work their ass off, and they're warriors. And they will beat you 9 times out of 10 just because of that.
Right, yeah, they're go-getters. I mean, they don't take it for granted, like you said. I mean, guys like that are perfect examples. But, I mean, sometimes you do get the guys who do get everything, and they put it together like Floyd Mayweather, Sugar Ray Leonard, guys who...
Muhammad Ali, yeah.
Yeah, guys who don't take it for granted. But, yeah, Broner, he's already over the hill. You know, a lot of people, they're like, well, he's young. What is he, 26, 27, 28, something like that right now?
Well, it seems like he's been around forever, though.
But he's already over the hill. I mean, that's just a fact. I mean, he was at his best at 135. He could have been a pretty damn good lightweight had he maintained his composure, kept it together, and continued to fight down there. But unfortunately, he's gone off chasing, paydays and blown up in weight, and now he's welterweight. I mean, again, he can be good at 140, but is he ever going to be the best? At 135, he was never the champion, but he was widely considered the best. I mean, even the Ring magazine, and I think this was one of their biggest screw-ups in the last 10 years, they put Adrian Broner as a top 5 pound-for-pound guy. Obviously, they jumped the gun, but I think they saw what a lot of us saw. I mean, at 135, he had big power. He was physically strong, really good hand speed. But now he's past it. I mean, he's no longer.
Yeah, they rated him off of the talent, not the accomplishments.
Not only that, even if he could move down to 135, that's not going to happen, of course. But even if he could do that, he still won't maximize his potential because mentally he's already done. He's been beaten. Yeah. He's had too many close calls, and that's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and it's a shame because, as we said, he has a ton of talent. All right, so we will go ahead and transition this. And also, if you want to read our article, check out the pictures our photographer James Ernest took during the fight. You can go to grillingtruth.net and check that out. And, of course, Jeremiah had to edit my mess that I wrote. So,
clean up crew, baby.
Which is not always the easiest thing in the world to do. I'm sure he'll tell you. But, all right, so we got 3 or 4 really big fights. We got a few other ones that we're not going to talk about because you can't pronounce their last names because they're European. So we'll start off with, in Canada on Friday night, pay-per-view card in Canada, Lucian Bute against Elidier Alvarez. Alvarez's biggest win was against Isaac Chilemba. Alvarez is 21-0. Bute's 32-3, coming off a solid performance that made it look like maybe he's not over the hill yet against Badou Jack. What's your take on this one?
Yeah, well, I mean, Alvarez is a good fighter. I've seen him a number of times. He's pretty solid. He's got pretty good skills. I don't know what it is. The Canadians seem to be picking up a lot of these immigrants, and a lot of them turn out to be solid guys. I mean, like Jean Pascal, Bute, Alvarez, the heavyweight. I'm trying to remember what his name is, and I can't. But for me, this is going to be another competitive losing efforts for Bute. I mean, part of the reason he was competitive, or at least it seems to be, was his PED use. I mean, he got popped for what I believe is some pretty stuff, some Osterine last time out. But it's a good fight in Canada. I mean, this is going to sell well. And if Bute wins, which I don't think he will, Bute is another guy I really like prime, but I just think Alvarez is going to end the decision here. Alvarez is not a big puncher. Bute has sort of regained his confidence after, having his soul taken by Carl Froch. But, yeah, I just think this is another losing effort. I think Bute is on his way out. He's trying to maximize, he's trying to, fatten his wallet before he retires. And I think Alvarez takes the decision here. Again, Alvarez is a solid guy, pretty good boxer, but not great.
Yeah. Then that will bring us to a fight that's been upgraded to an IBF super welterweight title fight. Jarrett Hurd against Tony Harrison. Sorry about that. Never been a big fan of Harrison. I think Jarrett Hurd takes this fight, and I think he has a bright future.
Well, I completely agree. I mean, I've seen a good number of prospects 54 pounds that look pretty good, and Hurd is one of my favorites so far. I mean, I've just really liked everything that I've seen from him. I mean, he seems to put everything together. I mean, I saw him against Jojo Dan. I saw him against Molina. He's looked rock solid in every single performance I've seen, and he's almost seemed to getting better. I mean, if you look at his record, I mean, he's got 5 knockouts in a row, and most of his last 8 fights have been knockouts. I mean, he's a classy fighter. Harrison he's got that Detroit, he wears the Kronk colors, and And, he's got the, Detroit back him and kind of the prestige of the city itself. But unfortunately, he's not one of those guys. I mean, I was pretty impressed in his last fight against Sergey Rabchenko, one of Ricky Hatton's fighters. He looked good, but I just don't see him as a world-class fighter. I mean, if you're getting beat pretty clearly by Willie Nelson, I don't think you're going to make it to the top. And Hurd,
yeah, because Willie Nelson's a good country singer, but he's like 80 years old now.
Right, yeah. I mean, I know he just got his black belt in karate. But still,
probably from Chuck Norris.
Yeah, probably. I mean, when you get, a pot-smoking 80-year-old, just hang it up. Hang it up, Harrison.
Yeah, but I think Hurd wins this fight easily. I think we agree on this one.
Yeah, I agree. I just think Hurd's a bit quicker. I think he's a bit more powerful. He's a bit more polished. And Harrison I don't think he has the chin or the heart to make it through.
All right. That brings us to what I guess would be the main event of the weekend for the WBC World Heavyweight Championship. We have Deontay Wilder, 37-0, 36 KOs, against fill-in sub Gerald Washington, who's 18-0 with 12 knockouts. Washington's probably claim to fame as beating Ray Austin and Old Eddie Chambers and Amir Mansour. Wilder's coming off victories over Areola, Molina, Stavern, Gavern. Neither one of them's really fought the greatest of competition. But I would say you have to favor Wilder, but I'm still not sold on him.
No, I think I'm not quite sure this fight's going to answer any questions for us. I mean, like you said, Washington's he's a late replacement, and funny enough, he's probably better than the guy originally slated to fight Wilder.
Yeah, I do think that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is I think this is a very good fight for Wilder. Washington is solid, but he just really hasn't struck me. Anything that he's done, I mean, his footwork, his power, his speed, nothing he's really done has struck me as awesome or noteworthy. Now, Wilder, as terrible as his balance can be sometimes, his hand speed is quick. His jab has developed. It's slightly better than it used to be, and he looks like he can punch. So I am going to favor Wilder pretty clearly here. I just think it's I can't fault Wilder. I think a lot of us are wanting to see him against greater competition, but I'm not going to fault him too much here since this is a late replacement.
All right, now we go to Jeremiah's news for the week. You got anything for us?
Jeremiah's news. Yeah, you hear Michael Watson got carjacked?
Yeah, I did hear that. What an asshole that would do that.
I have no idea, but, a lot of people have taken to, contacting Watson and, making sure that he's okay. And Watson was a solid middleweight, back in the day. Had a couple fights with but he was carjacked. Got beat up a bit, but he seems to be doing better, and we're all wishing him well.
Well, I think Michael Watson was actually better than just good. And
did you?
Yeah, I did. I thought he was pretty damn good. And, I mean, he fought in some wars, too. Chris Eubank, guys like that. So what do you got against Michael Watson?
I don't have anything against Michael Watson. I've got some against the carjackers, damn it. I got some against them. Yeah,
but if you look at Watson, I mean, his last two fights, of course, he had a TKO by Eubank. He lost a majority decision to Eubank. Got KO'd by Mike McCollum, but Mike McCollum to me is an all-time great. He beat Nigel Benn, which I think is one of the first times I ever remember seeing him fight. But, I mean, Nigel Benn, I think, was undefeated at the time, like 22-0. So he had to win over Benn. He had a rough fight against McCollum. I think he beat Earl Christie. And then he had the two Eubank fights. So really his career wasn't long enough to really see how good he really was. But I think he was beyond solid. I think he was a really good fighter. Damn shame what happened to him. Got anything else for the week?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to talk quickly about the Luke Campbell's fight that's coming up. Luke Campbell is an Olympian, gold medalist actually, in lightweight in the 2012 Olympic Games. Solid guy. He's actually I wrote an article on him a while back. and he's a solid guy. He did end up getting a loss. I think they just moved him a bit too quickly, but then he's since moved to a Cuban trainer, which makes sense for me because he's the Cubans just seem to work really well to southpaws. I don't know what it is, but it seems like the Cubans develop southpaws at an extraordinary rate. You look at Lara and Rigondeaux and a number of other fighters, and I don't know what the hell's going on there, but I think it's a good move to have a Cuban as a trainer. And he's in a winnable fight. This is a guy that I look forward to seeing progressing because 135 is actually pretty good, at least in Britain right now. And, I'm just looking forward to seeing him fight, and I think he takes it here.
Yeah, and Lopez is a guy that's got 6 losses, lost 3 of his last 6, actually. He's on a 3-win fight streak. But 2 of those 3 wins in the fight streak were against a guy that's 24-8. And for some reason, he knocked him out the first time, and they fought a rematch, and he knocked him out the second time. Campbell will take that one pretty easy also. But you got anything else for us?
Nah, not really a whole lot that's going on. It just looks like, again, it's still early in the year, and it seems like most of the big-timers fight around, April, May, so we're waiting for some of the cards to kind of come together. We're still waiting for, like, Chavez-Canelo. I actually heard Salido is going to be on the Chavez-Canelo undercard.
I'll tell you, did you see them in New York standing next to each other? If it was a basketball game, I would favor Chavez.
Oh, yeah? Well,
yeah, he looks a lot bigger, taller-wise, but he was looking down on him. But we also know this. Julio's probably stoned out of his mind right now anyways.
Yeah, he's probably in his mansion wearing pink underwear, eating a bowl of cereal. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not ripping on that because if we could live in a mansion, I would sit in pink underwear and eat a bowl of cereal too.
Yeah, smoke a big bowl.
And then I would call you and we'd do the show. Or we would just, cereal together in our pink underwear and do the show. That might be a little too gay, though.
Same house. No, it's not. No.
But you got any final words for the evening?
Final words. Well, besides wishing Michael Watson well, there's not a whole lot going on and not a whole lot I can say. What I do want to note is me being a Coloradoan, the fight scene out here it's not what it is in other states, of course. The gyms don't really promote boxing. It's more aimed towards, people here are pretty well off. So it's more about fitness than anything. But a promoter that I know named Chris Morris, he writes for Rocky Mountain Boxing, and it's the biggest, boxing site for, this region. He named Donald Camarena the trainer of the year. And I want to mention that I went to a gym a long time ago, and it was called Denver Police Brotherhood. And Donald Camarena was a trainer there. And I remember just how difficult he was, not to work with, not that he was stingy or anything, but just how much he worked my ass. The next day, it was one of those workouts where you don't think about going into a gym ever again. And I remember at the time, and Donald Camarena was a contender for a little while as well. During those days, he was fighting guys like Paulie Malignaggi, of course, losing, unfortunately. He actually got a fight on
Bradley, too, didn't he?
He did, yeah. Camarena was a solid fighter. One of the best that we've had. Yeah, he was one of the best we've had for a little while.
I think the Bradley fight and the Malignaggi, everybody goes the distance, and really Bradley, too. It's no big deal he went the distance against them because I think everybody does. But I think I remember seeing him win a fight one time, too, against James Creighton. It was for one of those, WBC America's Championships or something.
Well, you actually may be right because they showed the James Creighton fight on a local sports channel here called Altitude. So, that very well could happen.
I had Altitude.
Yeah.
When I had, DirecTV, but the sports package, and it gave you all them, but he beat Creighton. It probably would have been about 10, 12 years ago.
Yep, 2005. Yeah, I actually taped the fight. I've got it somewhere on VHS.
I do, too. They fought in, Wyoming.
Yeah, not many times you get televised fights up there, but Yeah,
I don't know, but we didn't talk about Roy Jones Jr.
Oh, yeah, how did we miss that? Roy Jones Jr.
I don't
Bobby
know. Maybe
Jones.
we don't care.
Yeah, well, I guess, hell, I don't know. But, I mean, did you see any of the fight?
I saw, like, the very end of it. I watched part of it because everything I could find on YouTube was in Russian, and my Russian's not very good since I don't speak any.
No, I've got to work on it, too. I'm doing Duolingo and seeing if I can, get in there. But, yeah, Roy Jones looked, I don't know how much this...
He looked good for a 49-year-old man in a boxing ring against a guy that's a bare-knuckle boxer, who was also 43 years old. So my only worry about this is maybe he'll try to fight somebody a little bit better now.
Oh, geez. Roy, listen, we like you, Roy, and we wish you the best. Just stick with this level of competition. If you're going to keep going, stay here.
Yeah, keep fighting white guys.
Yeah.
They're bare-knuckle boxers and in their 40s, and you'll be fine. Stay away from anybody under the age of probably 35.
Yeah, maybe he can bring out one of Kimbo Slice's boxing opponents, at this point he's just trying to milk it a little bit. I mean, if he needs some name recognition, I don't know.
I wonder we don't see him and James Toney fight again.
They should do it. At this point, oh, man, I've seen some recent James Toney, and Toney is the guy that I've got a lot of respect for, too, but he's nearing the point of, maybe the local sports athletic commissions need to start thinking about taking his life.
Then why are you yelling they should fight?
Because they're going to sanction the fight. The thing is, I think if I was running the show, I'd probably
to keep them from hurting each other, maybe, if they're fighting each other instead of somebody that might be able to do some damage.
Yeah, but you know what? At this point, they're going to sanction it. It'll sell well. Do it.
I don't think that'll sell well.
You don't think so? You don't think just on the name alone?
No, I don't think so anymore. They've both been shot for well over a decade. And you got to remember, younger boxing fans aren't going to care either way, and younger boxing fans under the age of 25 or 30 don't realize how great Roy Jones Jr. was anyways.
Yeah, I think it's all been kind of lost here. Roy Jones has dragged it on, but how many other fighters have done this? I like to focus on what Roy did in his first 49 fights.
Outside of, Holyfield, there weren't too many guys that drug it on this long. He's drug it on so long to guys that are, 25. The only thing they know is Roy Jones getting his ass kicked.
Yep, from Tarver on.
Yeah, Tarver and Glenn Johnson, and then it just kind of steamrolled from there.
Lebanon,
and really,
Macronelli.
Macronelli, I didn't even realize he fought Macronelli. And I know who Macronelli is because I remember the big build-up when he fought David Hay in that domestic fight over in the UK, which ended rather quickly. But I just wish he'd hang it up. Because, like I said, he is the one boxer that's done this for so long that I think he has actually hurt what people remember about him.
Yeah, no, it's
because he's done it so long, and it's not like he just makes a comeback every 3 or 4 years. He usually fights once or twice in a year.
Right. I remember his comeback against Felix Trinidad. At that point, I was like, oh, well, Roy's got a few years left.
We didn't know Trinidad was shot, too, at the time.
Yeah. Again, that was all money. But, yeah, at that time,
I've been married for, 21 years. And Roy Jones Jr., 21 years ago, had been the champion for a few years.
Well,
because I remember watching him on my 1-year anniversary. I think 1996 or 97, his 8th title defense. So I just wish he'd hang it up because I didn't like him when he fought because he was a little mouthy and stuff, and he ran around and beat the crap out of it. And I didn't like him mainly because he didn't fight Michalczewski. I think he would have beat Michalczewski. But it's just the fact that you had 2 light heavyweight champions for that long a time. And I hold it against Michalczewski, too, because I know Michalczewski didn't want to leave Germany. But when you're Roy Jones Jr., you're the world champion, not Michalczewski. Go defend it in the world. He could have went over to Germany and wiped the floor with Michalczewski in mid to late 90s.
Yeah, as skilled as Roy Jones Jr. was, I don't think he, a good number of his title fights at 175 did go the distance. And I think Michalczewski was a bit better than almost anybody that he fought there. Tarver's pretty good in his prime, But, Michalczewski had he was rock solid. That's a guy that I actually like. But, yeah, it's just unfortunate, and I think that it's a product of modern boxing. It's the WBO title. It's allowed all sorts of guys to just kind of stay at home and defend and collect paychecks. And
guys like Sven Odke. I mean, did he ever leave?
Yeah, Sven Odke. Arthur Abraham, that's another guy.
Yeah, but Abraham would at least defend against guys that were decent fighters at home.
Yeah,
I remember some of the guys Roy Jones was beating up. I remember the one was a post office worker he knocked out in the second round. I think his name was Ricky Frazier. I mean, he did beat some good fighters, but I just wish that he would have cleaned out Europe and England. Because, you had Chris Eubank over there, you had Nigel Benn, you had Michael Watson for a short period. Watson would have been before that time, but you had Benn, you had Eubank, you had Stevie Collins. I would like to see him fight any of those guys. I think he probably beats all of those guys, but I'd have liked to see it. Yeah,
I think even Michael Nunn was a contender for a short bit before he went to jail. If I'm not mistaken, I think Nunn was a contender there, and Nunn actually looked pretty solid at 175 too. I think he was a guy who could carry it pretty well. But yeah, there are all sorts of guys. You look at some of the contenders around that time, and even Joe Calzaghe. Joe Calzaghe was near the top of the 168 heap for years before he ever moved up to 175 and fought Roy.
Yeah, and everybody says that he fought Roy when Roy was over the hill, but Calzaghe wasn't necessarily a pup anymore.
No, he wasn't. He had already had, 20 defenses of that WBO trinket by that time?
Yeah, and right around the time he beat Jones, he also beat Hopkins, and Hopkins was in his prime at 40.
Right, yeah, Hopkins was still very good.
I think Joe Calzaghe's a guy that is vastly underrated. Now, I do have a problem with it. Took him until the end of his career to come over here and actually fight those guys.
Yeah.
But I remember the first time that I realized how good Calzaghe was I think, didn't Jeff Lacey go over there to fight him? And Calzaghe literally beat the hell out of him. Lacey was like the light heavyweight version of Mike Tyson back then. He was knocking everybody out one shot, and Calzaghe just took him to school.
Yeah, well, then again, Lacey was knocking out guys like Fitz Vanderpool, but he was certainly the favorite there. A lot of people, I remember those days because I would traffic the forums, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, Calzaghe's protected. He's got brittle hands, yada yada yada." Then he absolutely whoops Lacey in a stunning display. And
yeah, because I think a lot of people thought Lacey was going to go there and just knock his ass out.
Yeah, I think most people did. I think they thought Calzaghe was just some guy, one of the protected. They thought he was a Sven Odke. Because Calzaghe,
he was not a Sven Odke. Joe Calzaghe to me is an all-time great.
Yeah, Calzaghe was excellent. And unfortunately, I just wish 168 pounds didn't exist because then he would have participated at 175 with Michael Nunn, Roy Jones Jr., Michalczewski, Harding, Montel Griffin, Antonio Tarver, et cetera, et cetera. That would have been really interesting.
I'd take Calzaghe over all those guys, except maybe Jones. I think that's a toss-up in their absolute primes.
Yeah, well, imagine what a big fight that would have been in Europe if they could have made Michalczewski versus Joe Calzaghe. That would have been excellent. Yeah, but unfortunately, and this is, of course, my opinion, I just think the added weight divisions have kind of taken that.
I think there's some weight divisions are not bad. I don't think cruiserweight's bad. I don't think super middleweight's that bad. You got a difference of 15 pounds in between the two divisions.
I do think cruiserweight is. I think cruiserweight is a necessity. You couldn't do like you did back in the day when there were only 8 weight classes. You couldn't be 176 and compete against today's heavyweights. That's just not going to happen.
No. You couldn't be 190 and compete with him. You can't be 198 or 200 probably and compete with him.
No, you probably can't. We see what happens to a lot of these smaller heavyweights.
And really, I think the jump from middleweight to light heavyweight is fairly significant also.
It is significant. 15 pounds. That is a sizable jump, but back in the day when you didn't have, if you took away the weigh-ins for the day after or the day before, then I think it would level the playing field. I'll
give you this. I would not have a problem with all these divisions if they were only allowed to have one champion.
Yeah, I could certainly deal with that. I could deal with that, though I would like to see,
I think the biggest
like,
problem is having 3 or 4 champions, and then you got a bunch of fake title belts, the UBF or the UDF, whatever you call it. The World Boxing Foundation, which Jones is the cruiserweight champion of now. So
yeah. Well, I was going to say my thing is that I could deal with 17 weight classes and 1 champion per, but personally I would still like to see them thin it out a bit. I think the UFC had it right. I think they recognized what was right with boxing, and they took those elements. The thing about this, again, I could deal with 1 champion per division, but if you think about it, and I try to put this into perspective with what we've missed. I mean, pounds didn't exist, and Kostya Tszyu was competing with the likes of Shane Mosley, Oscar De La Hoya, Ike Corte, et cetera. Ricardo Lopez is a guy that a lot of people...
I do have a problem with the divisions that are like 118, 122, 126, 135, 130, 140. But I think when you get to the heavier classes, I just think 10 to 15 pounds is a huge difference. And I think you could have a guy that is naturally a, say, super middleweight that really wouldn't be as good at middleweight or light heavyweight.
Maybe. That's true. But
now, I don't believe that when you're talking 128 or 122, 118, 126. I mean, 3 or 4 pounds. I mean, come on.
Right.
And really,
yeah.
I think the weigh-ins should always be done the day of the fight.
Right. Yeah. That's my point. I think if we go back to that, then I think guys are going to be fighting, more in a more natural weight class, and then I don't think some of the size disparity counts for as much. But I mean,
sometimes now you get a middleweight fight where they'll weigh in at 158. The one guy weighs 161, and the other one weighs 175.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when. The most notable example is Arturo Gatti when he fought Joey Camachi. When he put on 20 pounds. I mean, but it's almost a common occurrence anymore. I mean, Lucas Matisse when he fought who the hell did he fight? Mike Dallas Jr. I think he put on 23 pounds.
That. I mean, the Gamache fight was damn near a murder.
Yeah, I mean, didn't they sue the family sue the athletic commission? I mean, that was
I'm pretty sure they did, because that was a joke. Because I mean, it looked like by the time they got in the ring, a welterweight against a lightweight.
Yep, certainly did.
That's basically what it was.
Yeah, I agree.
But then again, you can't blame a fighter for taking advantage of something that he can take advantage of.
Exactly. I mean,
you just have to blame the commission for allowing something like that to be able to happen.
Right. Well, I mean, and those are the sort of things they jump down. They should say, hey, this isn't working. We're having, it's too common occurrence for, these guys to weigh 20-plus pounds come fight night and, beating up guys who are naturally smaller. And unfortunately, when you get a lot of these guys who are big sellers, they can bring in, guys like Granados fighters. They can bring in guys like that, take advantage of them, and possibly hurt them.
Yeah, and I mean, Granados was taken advantage of, not to the possibility where he could have got hurt, but he was taken advantage of. Right. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I am now a huge Granados fan, just from watching him talk. I mean, he's a well-spoken young man. I mean, seems to have it all together, works his ass off. Didn't act like an asshole after he lost the fight. I mean, it should have been a draw. I had somebody give me crap on Twitter because I said that it was controversial. I think any decision that's close where half the people think it went one way and half think it went the other is controversial. It's not a robbery, not anything like that.
Yeah. No, I saw what you said. I mean, saying something is controversial isn't an indicator that it's that.
Man, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means a lot of people see something. I mean, there weren't too many rounds in that fight where when the round was over, somebody had definitely won the round.
Right.
And there was doubt in almost every round in that fight.
Yep.
And, I mean, I think it comes down to this also, the Ohio Boxing Commission. I mean, how can you have a bad scale? And how can that bad scale only weigh in Broner at the correct weight? I mean, that's fishy, I think.
Yeah.
And then to not reweigh him on the scale that's supposed to be right is even fishier.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you never know.
But it was never brought up by anybody. I know this, though. While they were standing there and Granados was reweighing, I mean, he did ask where Broner was and if he was going to weigh again, and everybody ignored him from what I saw. So, and I think the Ohio Boxing Commission is pretty much a joke anyways. And that's the problem. You need a national commission. You need somebody that, no matter where the fights are, you have somebody that knows what they're doing, controlling it. I mean, you go to Indiana, Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky. I remember Greg Page getting beat into a coma by Dale Crow at a place. I forget what the hell the name of the place was, but it seated like 500 people. Page gets beat down, hits his head when he gets knocked out in the 10th round, and there's no doctor, there's no ambulance there. They had to wait 10 or 15 minutes, and basically that was it for Page. And, I mean, it just – there needs to be a national commission that can oversee the sport and make sure that everybody follows the same guidelines.
Right. I mean, especially the judges as well. I mean, how many – far too often do we see this wide divergence in the way fights are scored. I mean,
but I can tell you this. If you watch a fight from ringside, according to where they are in the ring, you don't even know half the time if the guy connected or maybe hit a shoulder or he missed. Right. And, I mean, I think the problem with that is this. You could be off by a couple of points, but when you could be off in a decision and just totally blow a fight. But it seems to me like the same guys that blow fights blow them all the time, which calls into question the integrity of the sport.
Well, I mean, and I would add on to that point that some of the best-known judges, some of the ones that are constantly refereeing title fights,
are the worst ones.
Yeah, they're the worst offenders. I mean, I can't think of a single, I don't know, maybe Julie Letterman, but I can't think of a high-end judge who I have not thought at some point like, yeah, that guy was probably paid off.
Yeah, Chuck Giampa, Dwayne Ford.
Robert, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, they all, and especially Giampa and Ford from Las Vegas, there was a lot of questionable things there in the 70s and 80s with them. But
yeah,
what the hell?
Who was the guy? Yeah, I'm trying to think of the guy who scored the Oscar De La Hoya Trinidad fight, and he gave De La Hoya like the last round or something, and no other judges. I'm trying to think who it was. Damn it. Oh well. The point.
There was a Japanese judge that used to screw up scores really bad all the time too. I can't remember his name, but he screwed them up continuously. But I want to remind everybody that the new welterweight champion of the world, or at least has one of the belts, WBC belt, I believe it was, wasn't it?
Which one?
Peterson.
Oh, no, it's WBA.
WBA. All right. Well, see, that's why I want only one champion, and that's one less thing I have to remember. But WBA welterweight champion Lamont Peterson. We will be doing a special show tomorrow night with him and Barry Hunter, his trainers. I know Jeremiah is looking forward to that. Always
glad to have Barry on.
Yeah, and Lamont. So, and I think Anthony's fighting within the next month, and we were told that we would be able to get him before his fight also. We're going to get Kermit back on, too, since he's stepping up in class a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's on the verge of getting a solid fight.
Yeah. I mean, the Castillo fight's a fairly decent fight, at least. But
it is.
We'll get Kermit Cintron on here in a few weeks, too, and I would love to get Granados on. So if anybody that knows him hears this, tell him I'm a big fan now. But... all right, remember you can check out The Grueling Truth at thegruelingtruth.net. You can hear our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Music. Wherever you find podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.